Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in today's video, I just wanted to go over the two commanders that are coming out for the Precons in Edge of Eternities, and I gotta say overall, looking at the set so far within the spoilers, I am actually pretty excited for it. At first, I wasn't too excited, but after looking at the new cards and some of the reprints like the Shocklands, I gotta say my hype level came from 0 to 100 really quick. Also, the new Tezzeret looks really menacing in a colorless option that you could put in any deck that works with artifacts. I see this being a staple on a lot of different artifact decks for sure. Plus, we also got Aang from Avatar Last Airbender, the set that's coming out later this year. There's a lot of cool, exciting things. However, I wanted to focus on the two commanders from the Precons. I believe they're the secondary commanders. The first commanders are, I believe, spacecrafts, which is kind of cool. I'm excited to see what they are designed like. And I guess you could call these mini deck techs in a way. I know they're going to be in the Precons, where there's going to be probably some reprints of cards that I talk about today. So that is a fair warning. I just wanted to talk about these commanders and some synergies you could follow if you want to build these from scratch. Or maybe if some cards are not in the Precons, they can actually be a good upgrade if you're looking at this video in the future after the set is released. So let's go over the counterintelligence commander, which is Kylo, Apogee Mind. So this is quite interesting as a Jeskai color combination commander. The art is pretty cool. It's a legendary artifact creature, robot artificer, and it has haste, and whenever Kylo becomes tapped, you proliferate. So with proliferation, you choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind that they already have. So I like this because I believe there's going to be a lot of different combos that you could run with this. I've already seen a ton. Just to name one example, you could use Pentad Prism and Aura Domination. You could use this to essentially get infinite proliferation triggers, which is kind of cool because even though you're netting basically nothing on mana, you're basically getting infinite proliferates. Or if you have a lot of planeswalkers, or even if your opponents are infected, or if you have a huge spaceship you're trying to reach the maximum, I believe, charge counters on them, you have a way to do that easily with this commander and those combinations. Of course, this is a very neat, interesting designed commander because it could go in a lot of different directions. Like I mentioned previously, planeswalkers, you could bump up those loyalty counters. You could go a little bit more salt-inducing with the infect theme, even though it's kind of hard to do that because you don't have black or green, which are really good infect colors. You could go in the 1/1 counter strategy. You could go into the spaceship strategy, vehicle strategy, really anything that has to do with tapping creatures, because I believe with the spaceships, at least the one that we saw, you're tapping down creatures to get charge counters on them, and with obviously proliferation, you're getting 2 instead of 1, so that is very nice. And to be honest, something I love about this commander is the fact that it is so simple. With commander design nowadays having paragraphs after paragraphs of text, this only has really 2 things it's doing. It's swinging in with haste, and when it gets tapped, you proliferate. Though I will say the more cards you have with counters on them on the battlefield or on a player, the more complicated it will get and the longer turns you will have. So that's probably why it is so simple as a commander, because it's going to create a complex board state where you're going to have to keep track of a lot of different counters. So this is a very simple commander, and also the art is very cool. I love robots. This is a very cool robot artificer. I'm going to wait a little bit before I see if I want to build around it, because there's probably going to be a lot of cool robots in the main set or even in the Precon. I don't know. We'll find out when we get there. But now let's move along and talk about the other commander of the other deck, and that is Sarzel Genesis Shepherd from the World Shaper Jund Precon deck. And this one looks quite interesting. It does remind me of a couple different commanders in a way. For 2 black, red, and a green, it's a legendary creature, insect druid with flying, and it has a Crucible of Worlds ability. You may play lands from your graveyard, which is quite powerful, and it has another ability. Whenever you sacrifice another non-token permanent during your turn, you put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Sarzel's power on up to 1 other target creature. So I think this is a pretty neat design, even though it is going into that normal Jund landfall theme, which is quite common nowadays. However, I like the design of sacrificing non-token permanents. It's not just relying on sacrificing your lands or even creatures. Any non-token permanent you can sacrifice to put counters on a creature. It kind of reminds me of Hana and Alayla Partners, where you're putting counters equal to its power onto another creature and giving it haste, and this is going into it a little bit differently by sacrificing non-token permanents. There's a lot of cool cards that you could put in this deck that I think would work perfectly. One would be like Gaterog Ravenous Ride. I think this would be absolutely perfect because you're sacrificing a creature, and when you do, you're basically drawing cards equal to its power that you sacrificed, and then putting any number of lands lands from your hand onto the battlefield. That is really going to amplify the power of this deck. I also like Bantu. This is another excellent card because you could sacrifice any permanent, whether it's your lands, creatures on the battlefield, you sacrifice those, draw a bunch of cards, and then get a bunch of 1/1 counters on creatures you control. But when I saw this commander, my thoughts immediately went to Nahiri's Lithoforming. This is crazy because you sacrifice X lands where you pay X into the mana cost. For each land sacrifice this way, draw a card. You may play X additional lands this turn. Lands you control enter the battlefield tapped this turn. So what I like about this card is the fact that you sacrifice all the lands you control, and then you draw that many cards, and you can just play those lands from your graveyard onto the battlefield with your commander and buff up creatures you control on the battlefield too. Another interesting route is by doing power and toughness doubling. For example, Zapandra Hunger Dominus or even Unnatural Growth can amplify the power of this commander and amplify the power of other creatures you control when you get into that combat. So this isn't just your typical landfall commander. I think there's a lot more interesting designs you could go with. It could go into Aristocrats, weirdly enough. I believe Drivnod Carnage Dominus works with this because if you sacrifice a creature, it'll double the trigger of the commander. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not 100% sure. So now that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for coming by and watching this video on the analysis of the 2 backup commanders for the new commander precons that are coming out for Edge of Eternities. Again, I'm pretty excited for this set. I'm going to cover a lot of different spoilers and make a lot of deck text for this set. So stay tuned by subscribing. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.